Melbourne today, Jimmy, rose from 9th to 4th on the ladder in one day. That just tells you how tight this ladder is. And let's dive into this game first. How did it play out at the MCG?
Well, Tom, it played out with a lot of intrigue around Max Gawn. He did a fitness test before the game. He was testing out his calf injury, and I saw Max Gawn's comments post this match, and he's thinking, I'm going to do a fitness test every week, because he was absolutely dominant today. He destroyed Rowan Marshall on the ruck, and Rowan Marshall's been fantastic. Bailey Fritsch, all class. He kicked one on his left, and then look at this one on the right. Just swung it back absolutely beautifully. Petrarca got a goal from centre bounce, and Viney, who you and I are both off air talking about, the big improvement in his game has been his field kicking. He's been doing a lot of work with Mark Williams, but he's class. Look at this for a goal. Little sidestep, shimmy, great amount of power generated off one step. The Saints, again, the same old issues, reared their head, which we'll talk a little bit further about later. Kicked some junk time goals. They really only kicked 6 goals and then piled on 3 late in the game. Just not effective enough. But this is a great moment. Lever up in the grandstand. These two are like, they call themselves an old bickering couple at centre-half back and full-back. But for the full-back, Stephen May to kick a goal and a great celebration. And we love it when full-backs and defenders get down the ground and hit the scoreboard. But again, for the Saints, it was just stodgy ball movement. And if you looked at the Demons, probably the one negative that came out of it again, Harrison Petty picked up an injury, which adds another question around their forward line going forward.
Lee, Max Gawn's an unbelievable footballer, isn't he?
He's a bit of the exception to the rule. He's a ruckman who does big man stuff. He's really good at the hit-outs, and he marks the ball 6 or 7 times a game. He gets the ground level stats, which even the old-style ruckman didn't get as many of the ground level stats. But no, he's a wonderful big guy, Max. He can dominate the game.
And it's amazing that he doesn't really polar too well on the brown, though, given how dominant he is. But today he was under that fitness cloud. And, Jimmy, he performed against a very good ruckman all day in Rowan Marshall.
He's such a star, and he's been a star of this generation. And Lee, you and I have spoken about this. He's a bit of a throwback to the ruckman that you used to play against, who got around the ground and marked the footy a lot. He's one of the few ruckmen who takes a lot of contested marks where he decides to sit behind the ball or push forward.
Well, you're trying to actually avoid him, aren't they? The opposition are trying to avoid kicking to him in that down the line situation. You know, Melbourne have done a good job if the opposition have to kick to a pack where Max is, because if he doesn't mark it, he definitely does not get marked against.
All right, let's talk about the Saints now. And the heat is fairly and squarely on St Kilda Football Club again tonight, as it was last week and as it has been for much of the season. I want to talk about their ball movement, their lack of scoring. But before I get your thoughts, Jimmy and Lee, this is Dave Misson, the head of footy, and Ross Lyon today speaking on radio and after the game.
Yeah, look, in a general sense, we are looking to move it quick and, you know, get it into our forward line with as much sort of low density in that forward line as we can for our, you know, key forwards in particular. But I think, you know, on reflection after the Hawthorn game, you know, we probably think the players are a little bit confused as to how to do that. So we feel that we spent a lot of time trying to clarify what quick ball movement is and you know, getting the ball inside 50 to give our forwards the best chance we can.
Look, we're transitioning. We're playing. Last year we played finals, and not many talk about it, but the informed ones do, and the ones that want to prosecute a positive case will tell you. I forget the age group, it was 21 and under. No one played more 21 and unders and got more games than them and played finals in the last 15 years than us. But no one wants to prosecute that case. But it doesn't matter now.
I'll prosecute it for you. Yes, you're young, but your game style is not stacking up to the way premiership teams play at the moment. I get that you've got some confusion with your ball movement and your transition, and you say you're trying to attack more. You sit 16th for scores, and we reflected on this last week. That is typical of a Ross Lyon side. You're 18th from scores from forward half, which is what I want to touch on, but 14th from inside forward 50s. I get the ball movement from your back half is great, and I acknowledge how well they defend as a team. But the modern game is about forward half turnovers and scores from stoppage, especially in the forward half, and they're 18th for scores from forward half. So somehow they've got to move this great defensive structure that he takes, and I acknowledge that, Ross.
Yeah.
But you've got to bring it up the ground, because what the opposition say is if you can transition all the way from the back half to the front half, maybe once or twice, which is about the rate in the competition, you're still only kicking 8 goals. And what are the Saints producing week in, week out? They kicked 8 goals from D50 this week. So the opposition's comfortable with you doing that, but you've got to actually move it up the ground. I think for the rest of the year, they've got to actually explore some players in different positions, because that's where they are.
So such as who?
Why not give Filippo a role at half-back? Why not ask Max King to come up the ground and be a bit of that connecting piece to get the ball into the front half? You've got to dial up from being tackles inside forward 50. They currently sit 12th on that.
Yeah.
And everyone often, Lee, talks about connection as an attacking thing, but you need connection in defence. So you need the forwards to tackle and put pressure on, you need mids to cut out the releases, and you need the backs to get up high.
Need a lot of things to be better, don't they? I mean, they were a contender. They were top half last year. They finished top half. They were playing top half, and probably for the first part of this year, actually, they were a little unlucky, lost some close games. But it's amazing how the scoreboard and the win-loss ratio can jump on your back and become so much pressure. And St Kilda are probably suffering from that. So they're a mile off where they were 12 months ago, let alone. So who knows where they're going to be in the next few months and even next year onwards.
Well, let's hypothesise for a moment, Lee, on that. I'm intrigued at their list management. Stephen Silvani and Gabby Allen have a really difficult job in turning over this list even more, so it is competitive next year. Andrew Bassett, in October 2022, their president said, "Are we at risk of being stuck in the 6 to 10 zone?" The truth is they're not at the moment because they're well below that. They're a long way below being even in that zone. So I think, from a St Kilda perspective, they need to put everyone on the table except for probably Rowan Marshall and Jack Sinclair. They need to say, if you have a deal for Max King, come and offer it for us, because he's not the player that we thought he was going to be. Even Jack Steele, there was murmurs last year that clubs could be interested, or the Saints would potentially be keen to move him on for the right deal. They need to be bold, they need to be aggressive, they need to be brash, and make sure that they can turn over this list in a way that makes them competitive again, Lee, because at the moment they're just neutral, they're nowhere.
I hear your words, Tom, but this theory that we get rid of the good players we've got and draft some kids and hope like hell they'll be better in a few years' time. I mean, you've got to build up through the free agency if you can, and we know St Kilda are out in the market offering really big numbers to some midfield guys trying to get some players into the club. But I think you've got to build from what you got, not start again and chuck out what has got you to be a good team at least last season.
Lee, I'd agree with you there if they could get some free agents in, but Jake Niall wrote a great piece for The Age. The Saints and North simply can't attract gun free agents, and it's going to be intriguing to see how they go about bringing some players in, Jimmy.
Yeah, and just to finish the point before, why not see Henry and Owens up on ball a bit, Sinclair full-time mid? What about Wanganeen Malera coming as a high half forward? Let's explore some of those options and maybe find then what you need to add.
Hey, Lee, I'm going to ask you about the Hawks and the Brisbane Lions today. This might hurt a little bit because the Hawks are in some ripping form and the Lions probably dropped a game that you would have expected them to win.
Well, needed to win anyway if they want to be sort of in the finals even at the end of the season. No, it was. Hawthorn have had a good last month, so all of a sudden they've got a good patch of form. And certainly today they jumped into the game. I mean, they based their pressure, their clearance work was good, their centre bounce work was good. Cam McKenzie got that first goal, and yes, this is noteworthy. Jack Ginnivan got a high tackle. That's really noteworthy. And then this is centre bounce stuff when every now and again got out the front, and then that becomes such an easy transition to into Chol, who marked the ball, kicked the goal. Zach Bailey came back from injuries, didn't do a lot today. Got that goal, scrubbed another one through later in the game. Jack Gunston was interesting. I mean, obviously he came back to Hawthorn from the Lions. They looked like trying to get him to be taking care, if he could, of Harris Andrews. Now, Harris Andrews took plenty of intercept marks, even though Gunston was around him. But Gunston got on the end of 4 kicks and kicked 4 goals, so he was really important. Nice being a coach with about 27 seconds to go and about 4 goals in front. I tell you what, coaching's fun then.
We love that, and I love watching Sam Mitchell in those situations. I love seeing Jack Gunston come back to the club and kick goals against, a team that he was at for a year, and that was the final goal of the game as well. The Hawks are in some ripping form, really. They've won 4 of their last 6, 5 in a row against the Brisbane Lions. And it wasn't until the last 3 minutes, Lee, you'd be happy with this, that they sent Blake Hardwick behind the ball. But let's have a listen to Sam Mitchell after the match.
I think the work during the week was pretty painful, to be honest. We had to rewatch that a lot last week and do the learning, and it was not an easy thing to do. But the players were, amazing in their commitment to really try and make sure we learn the lessons. And I think collectively, in the same way we lost together last week, we knew that there were things we could have done better as coaches, as players. Today we really feel like we won together. We handled the situation better.
Yeah, you did learn from your lessons and it'll stand them in good stead in the future. And Tom, you touched on their recent record. 4 4 wins, 2 losses, but look at this against the Lions in particular, 5 in a row. So the old-fashioned got the wood on the side, they've got it. But I think in their recent time where they've really improved, and I'll highlight 3 players in particular. I think Lloyd Meek in the ruck has been going really well as the sole ruckman. He's getting first hands on the footy. James Warple, but along with Will Day. Now, those two complement each other really well, and I think we touched on this early in the year. They've got so much talent midfield and around the flanks and wings and finding the right combination. So they're starting to get, with Will Day back and Warple and a couple other guys, Newcomb coming in there, what guys look really good with other guys around them. So they're scoring really well off stoppages. In the last 3 weeks, they've made a 6-goal turnaround and scores from stoppage. So that's been a massive room for improvement.
All right, the Hawks are going pretty well. The Lions are not. They've won 4 of 11 games. This was their coach, Chris Fagan, after the match.
It's not the end of the world. They're a pretty good side, Hawthorn. They've been in good form lately. You know, they've beaten St Kilda and the Dogs, pushed Port last week. That's good form.
A pretty jovial Chris Fagan after the game. Lee, you tell me every week, don't read too much into what coaches say post-game.
Yes.
But surely there's some issues at the Lions now that need to be rectified pretty soon.
No, he'd be very disappointed after today. I mean, 4.5 wins, 6.5 losses, basically with the draw about the halfway point of the season. There's 2 or 3 wins at least below where the Lions would like to be. And I think one of the issues has been one of the most basic things in footy. Their inaccuracy has been terrible. And particularly if you go to who are their main goal kickers, probably Joe Danaher and Charlie Cameron, they themselves are scoring about 40% from goals from shots. So they are just sort of way down on that accuracy part of the game, which has cost them 2 or 3 games. Then you go and look at the individual players, and I would have thought there's very few players in that Hawthorn team, that Lions team. Maybe Harris Andrews has been as good as he's been in previous seasons. They've had a few that have been a little bit improved. Lachie Neale so much carries that midfield when he's on, as he was in the second and third quarter today. They got themselves back in the game, but mostly Hugh McCluggage, I don't think's been as good as he maybe was last year. Zach Bailey, I'd put in that category. So really, they've just had a lot of players who've been very inconsistent, either injured, but inconsistent in being able to put it all together at the one time, which means they've dropped well out of the contention stakes.
Lee, you're close to Chris Fagan. What's your advice for him?
Persevere, keep at it, keep your chin up, got faith in you.
Pretty simple, pragmatic as always, Lee Matthews. Let's move on to Adelaide and West Coast now. And this was an absolute bloodbath at Adelaide Oval today. The margin was 99 points, and from the first 5 minutes, it was a one-sided game.
Yeah, we sort of expected this from West Coast. They had a fantastic win over there in the West against the D's and had a bit of a letdown, of course, going to the Crows. And we know the Crows can get a hold of sides, especially there at the Adelaide Oval. And the Eagles, the last 3 times they've walloped them, and it's been Tex filling his boots 10 and 9 the last 2 times. But it was Jordan Dawson who got off to an absolute fly, had 12 touches and 2 goals for the game, finished with 32 and 2. Scholl, 34 and 1. Rory Laird was really good. He had 30 touches, but for me it was nearly 500 metres gain, so willing to kick the footy a lot more. Fogarty was good. They had 13 different goal kickers, with Chase Jones being the leading goal kicker with 3 goals. McGovern did everything he could down back with the amount of footy going down there, but they just couldn't get their hands on the ball. The Crows won every single statistic, were very clean, kept it off the Eagles all the way through. The Eagles only had...
Love this. Look at this. I do like that though, Jimmy.
Yeah, that'll get us excited. Look, he kept fend-offs everywhere. Look, they still had a crack, West Coast, but they were just outclassed, and they probably said Adelaide were really clean. Nice little hanger there. West Coast only had 263 disposals, the least by any side for the season, but you expect a bit of a letdown here and there from the Eagles. They've been having a decent crack.
All right, 14 possessions, 11 contested and 1 goal for Harley Reid, but clearly West Coast. The gap between West Coast, good and bad, is by far the biggest in the AFL at the moment. At their best, Max Gawn said during the week that they were like a top 5 team last week against the D's, and then today obviously they really struggled, so they've got things to work on, but they are showing some good signs here and there throughout the season, certainly more than this time last year.